The sound of crystal laughter pierced the autumn air like shards of ice, each peal more cutting than the last. Lady Eleanor Ashcombe stood motionless at the centre of Somerset Hall's grand ballroom, her gloved fingers pressed against the ancient pearls at her throat, her mother's pearls, worn this evening in a moment of uncharacteristic vanity that she now bitterly regretted. The string of 32 lustrous orbs, one acquired for each year of her life, had drawn the most unwelcome attention. Pearls for an unwed lady of her age? Came the whispered jeer from Lady Claribel Hawthorne, the season's most celebrated debutante, whose 19 years afforded her the cruelty of youth. How peculiarly appropriate, like tears captured and worn as trophies of one's solitude. The whisper was not meant to be concealed, but rather to ripple outward like the expanding circles of a stone cast upon still water. Eleanor felt rather than saw the wave of amusement passing through the assembly, the glances darting her way, the suppressed smiles behind raised fans, and the embarrassed silence of those who might have defended her, but chose the safety of complicit quietude. "I should think," continued Lady Claribel with mock thoughtfulness, "that 32 pearls must represent a considerable weight to bear, nearly as heavy as 32 years of disappointed hopes. Would you not agree, Lord Vale?" Lord Roderick Vale, whose golden hair and celestial features belied the corrosive nature of his character, stepped forward with practiced grace. "Indeed, Lady Claribel, though one must admire the fortitude required to display such a comprehensive accounting of one's years." His blue eyes, cold as midwinter frost, moved deliberately across Eleanor's face, cataloguing each line, each subtle mark that time had etched upon features once celebrated for their freshness. Eleanor's spine stiffened imperceptibly beneath her silver-grey gown. The fabric, selected for its subtle elegance, now seemed to her a wretched concession to age, a capitulation to the inevitable march of time. Yet her voice, when it emerged, carried the quiet dignity that had sustained her through seasons of gradually diminishing invitations and increasingly transparent pity. "How fortunate we are, Lord Vale, to live in an age where the young may speak so freely of matters they have yet to comprehend. It speaks to the generosity of our modern times." The retort, mild though it was, only intensified the collective amusement. Lord Vale's companion, the serpentine Viscount Crispin Dallow, tilted his head with the predatory alertness of one who scents weakness. "Lady Eleanor speaks of modern times, yet adorns herself as though awaiting a suitor from the previous century. The pearls are exquisite, to be sure, but perhaps more suited to a dowager than to one who—" he paused with cruel deliberation, "who must surely still harbour hopes of a favourable match." The laughter that followed was no longer concealed behind fans or gloves. It erupted with the force of released tension, reverberating from the gilded ceiling and crystal chandeliers, transforming the elegant ballroom into a colosseum of social execution. Eleanor felt a warm flush rising from her chest to her throat, threatening to betray her composure with the crimson flag of humiliation. In that moment of perfect mortification, the massive double doors at the end of the ballroom swung open with authoritative deliberation. The laughter died upon the lips of the assembled guests as swiftly as a candle extinguished by a sudden draught. The collective intake of breath created a vacuum of anticipation into which stepped a figure of such commanding presence that the very air seemed to reorient itself around him. The Duke of Wessex had arrived. His entrance had not been announced. It did not need to be. At 42 years, Adrian Blackwood, the 6th Duke of Wessex, carried his title with the effortless authority of one who had never questioned his place in the world. His evening attire, impeccably tailored yet defiantly austere, emphasized the breadth of shoulders that had once borne a colonel's epaulets through the Crimean campaigns. Silver-shot black hair swept back from a forehead unmarked by frivolity, while his eyes, startlingly blue against his weather-bronzed complexion, surveyed the assembly with disconcerting directness. Those eyes now came to rest upon the tableau before him, Lady Eleanor at its centre, her complexion alternating between alabaster paleness and mortified flush, the smirking triumvirate of Lady Claribel, Lord Vale, and Viscount Dallow, and the wider circle of onlookers now hastily rearranging their features to erase all traces of cruel mirth. "I appear to have interrupted something of significance," observed the Duke, his voice pitched precisely at that volume which commands attention without suggesting effort. "Pray continue, Lady Claribel. I find myself most interested in your discourse on, what was it? The appropriate adornments for ladies of varying stations, a subject in which you must be remarkably well versed, given your extensive experience." A silence fell so profound that Eleanor could hear the soft hiss of the candle flames. Lady Claribel's porcelain complexion blanched further still, her mouth opening and closing like a fish suddenly deprived of water. Lord Vale, with greater presence of mind, attempted to salvage the moment. "Your Grace honours us with your presence. We were merely engaging in light conversation to enliven the evening." "Indeed?" The Duke raised a single dark eyebrow. "How fortunate that I arrived in time to partake in such edifying exchange. Lady Eleanor," he continued, turning toward her with a slight bow that nonetheless conveyed profound respect, "I believe I promised your late father that I would claim a dance should our paths cross in society. If you would do me the honour." The room collectively held its breath. Eleanor felt the weight of hundreds of eyes upon her, incredulous at this unexpected turn of events. With remarkable composure, she extended her gloved hand. "The honour would be mine, Your Grace." As the Duke led her toward the centre of the ballroom, the orchestra, sensing the dramatic shift in atmosphere, struck up a stately waltz. Eleanor felt his hand at her waist, firm yet respectful, maintaining the precise distance that propriety demanded. "You must forgive my tardiness, Lady Eleanor," he murmured, guiding her through the opening turns with flawless precision. "Had I known that vultures had descended upon the gathering, I would have made greater haste." "Your timing was impeccable, Your Grace," she replied, her voice steady despite the tumult of emotions beneath her composed exterior. "Though I fear you have now associated yourself with an object of ridicule." The Duke's expression remained inscrutable, but something flickered in the depths of his eyes, something that might have been anger or perhaps a more complex emotion. "The ridicule of fools has never troubled me," he said simply. "I find that true value, like true character, becomes more evident with the passage of time. Your pearls, Lady Eleanor, they suit you admirably." For the first time that evening, Eleanor's smile reached her eyes. "Each one earned, Your Grace." "As all treasures of worth should be," he replied, and in that moment, as they turned beneath the glittering chandeliers, the whispers around them took on a different tenor, one of speculation, curiosity, and the dawning realization that perhaps they had witnessed not the continuation of a woman's social humiliation, but the beginning of her unexpected triumph. Neither of them noticed Lord Roderick Vale watching from the periphery, his handsome features contorted into an expression that bore little resemblance to his customary charm. Beside him, Viscount Dallow leaned close to whisper something that caused Vale's eyes to narrow with calculated intent. Beyond the windows of Somerset Hall, a fine mist began to rise from the gardens, shrouding the autumn roses in a veil of uncertainty. 3 days following the Somerset Hall ball, Lady Eleanor Ashcombe sat in the morning room of her modest Mayfair residence, a shaft of pale October sunlight illuminating the letter in her trembling hands. The envelope, crafted of the finest cream vellum and sealed with the imposing Wessex crest pressed into deep blue wax, had arrived with the morning post, causing her lady's maid to stare with undisguised astonishment before presenting it upon the silver salver. "From His Grace the Duke of Wessex," the maid had announced, her voice pitched higher than usual with the significance of the delivery. Now, having broken the seal with uncharacteristic haste, Eleanor stared at the bold, masculine script that filled the single page. "Lady Eleanor, I write to express my profound appreciation for the dance we shared at Somerset Hall. Your Grace, under the most trying of circumstances, confirmed what I have long observed from afar, that true nobility resides not in titles, but in character. If it would not impose upon your schedule, I should be honoured if you would permit me to call upon you this afternoon at 2 o'clock. I have a matter of some importance to discuss, which would benefit greatly from your discernment. I remain, with sincere regard, Adrian Blackwood, Duke of Wessex." Eleanor folded the letter with deliberate care, smoothing her fingertips over the heavy paper, as though the physical contact might reveal some hidden meaning behind the formal words. A visit from the Duke of Wessex to her home was unprecedented. Despite her family's respectable lineage, the Ashcombes had never moved in the innermost circles of society, and since her father's death 5 years prior, leaving her in possession of a modest income and this small but elegant townhouse, Eleanor had gradually receded from the social foreground. "Martha," she called to her maid, who had been hovering with transparent curiosity near the doorway, "we shall receive His Grace at 2 o'clock. Please ensure that tea is prepared accordingly." "Yes, my lady," Martha replied, eyes wide. "Shall I prepare the silver service?" "The Wedgwood will suffice," Eleanor answered with quiet dignity, "and perhaps the lavender shortbread." Left alone, Eleanor rose and moved to the small writing desk positioned near the window. The street below bustled with the usual morning activity, but she scarcely registered the passing carriages and pedestrians. Instead, her mind travelled back to the moment when the Duke had appeared at Somerset Hall, his timely intervention halting her public mortification. Had it been mere coincidence, or had he deliberately sought to shield her from cruelty? She knew little of Adrian Blackwood beyond what society whispered, a decorated military man who had returned from the Crimea with honours and scars in equal measure, a landowner whose estates were said to be models of modern efficiency and fair management, a widower whose brief marriage had ended in tragedy some 15 years ago, leaving him without heir or apparent interest in securing one. He moved through society with detached politeness, fulfilling his obligations without engaging in its frivolities, and now he wished to call upon her. At precisely 5 minutes before 2 o'clock, Eleanor descended to the drawing-room. She had changed from her morning dress into a gown of deep violet silk, not her finest, which might have suggested an unseemly eagerness, but one that complemented her still slender figure and brought warmth to her complexion. Her chestnut hair was arranged in a simple but elegant chignon, adorned only with a single amethyst pin that had belonged to her mother. Around her throat she wore the pearl necklace, a deliberate choice that even she did not fully understand. The clock on the mantel had just struck 2 when the knocker sounded. Eleanor smoothed her skirts and drew a steadying breath, maintaining her seated position as propriety dictated, while the butler announced the arrival of His Grace, the Duke of Wessex. He entered the room with the same commanding presence that had silenced the ballroom, though his attire was now the more subdued elegance of daytime formal wear. Upon seeing her, he executed a perfect bow, neither too deep for her station nor too shallow for respect. "Lady Eleanor," he greeted her, his voice as she remembered it, deep and assured, with the faintest trace of what might be northern inflection beneath the polished aristocratic tones. "Your Grace," she responded, extending her hand, which he took with a brief, formal touch. "You honour my home with your presence." "The honour is entirely mine," he replied, taking the seat she indicated. "I trust you will forgive the precipitous nature of my request to call upon you." "There is nothing to forgive," Eleanor said, signalling to Martha to begin serving the tea. "Indeed, I should thank you for your timely intervention at Somerset Hall. It was most gallant." The Duke accepted the delicate teacup, his large hands incongruous against the fine china. "Not gallantry, Lady Eleanor, mere decency, a quality which appears to be in regrettably short supply in certain quarters of society." Martha withdrew, closing the door with exaggerated care, leaving them in a privacy that was both perfectly proper and strangely intimate. Eleanor was acutely aware of the Duke's presence, the subtle scent of sandalwood and leather that accompanied him, the way his shoulders filled the confines of his impeccably tailored coat, the surprising gentleness with which he handled the fragile teacup. "You mentioned in your letter a matter of importance," she prompted after a suitable interval of polite conversation about the weather and the changing season. "Indeed." The Duke set down his cup with deliberation. "Lady Eleanor, I shall be direct, as obfuscation serves neither of us. I have observed you in society for some time, though our paths have rarely crossed directly." Eleanor felt a curious tightening in her chest. "Observed me, Your Grace?" "Yes. I have noted your dignity, your intelligence, your kindness toward those whom others overlook." His blue eyes held hers with uncomfortable directness. "I have also observed the increasing cruelty with which society treats women of a certain age who remain unmarried regardless of their character or accomplishments." A flush rose to Eleanor's cheeks, but she did not look away. "The world is often unkind to those who do not conform to its expectations, Your Grace. One learns to endure." "One should not have to merely endure, Lady Eleanor." For the first time, a hint of emotion roughened the Duke's measured tones, particularly when one possesses qualities far superior to those who presume to judge. He rose suddenly, moving to the window with fluid grace despite his imposing stature. For a moment he gazed out at the street below, his profile sharp against the afternoon light. "I find myself in a position that requires a decision," he said at length, turning back to face her. "My estates, my responsibilities to my tenants and dependents, and my obligations to the Wessex legacy all demand that I secure the succession. At 42, I can no longer postpone the inevitable." Eleanor set down her own cup, her heart beating with uncomfortable rapidity. "I understand, Your Grace, but I fail to see how this concerns—" "I require a Duchess," he interrupted, his directness startling in its simplicity. "Not a debutante whose head is filled with romantic notions and social ambitions, but a woman of maturity, intelligence and character. A partner, Lady Eleanor, not an ornament. The silence that followed was profound. Eleanor found herself unable to formulate a response, the implications of his statement too monumental to immediately comprehend. I realize this approach lacks the romantic flourishes that society expects, the Duke continued, his voice softening slightly. But I believe in honesty between equals, and I believe, Lady Eleanor, that we could be equals in a union that would benefit us both. Eleanor's hands, normally so steady, trembled slightly as she smoothed her skirts. Your Grace, you cannot mean, that is, surely there are countless young women of superior rank and fortune who would— I have no interest in youth for its own sake, he said firmly, nor in rank or fortune. I possess sufficient of both. What I seek is a woman who understands the world as it is, not as romantic novels portray it. A woman who values substance over appearance, duty over frivolity, and genuine connection over social advantage. He moved closer, though still maintaining a respectful distance. I observed your response to the cruelty at Somerset Hall. Another woman might have fled in tears, or retaliated with matching venom. You stood your ground with dignity, neither cowering nor descending to their level. That strength of character is worth more than youth or beauty, which are, after all, the most transient of gifts. Eleanor rose now, needing to feel the equality of standing before him. You speak of a practical arrangement, then. I speak of a marriage, he corrected gently. One founded on mutual respect and shared values, rather than transient passion or social ambition. I believe we could forge a genuine partnership, Lady Eleanor, one that would confound the very society that takes such pleasure in diminishing those who defy its arbitrary rules. Outside, a carriage clattered past, momentarily breaking the intensity of the moment. Eleanor moved to the fireplace, resting one hand upon the mantel as she gathered her thoughts. Your proposal is unexpected, Your Grace. Adrian, he said quietly. If we are to contemplate a shared future, we might begin with my name. Adrian, she repeated, the syllables unfamiliar upon her tongue. She turned to face him. You must know that such a match would provoke considerable speculation. The Duke of Wessex might have any bride he desired, to choose a woman of 32, of modest fortune, and no extraordinary beauty. I find your assessment of yourself unnecessarily harsh, he interjected, a sudden warmth entering his gaze. As for speculation, let them speculate. Society will always find reason to gossip. Better to give them cause through actions of worth than to live in fear of their judgment. Eleanor's fingers moved unconsciously to the pearls at her throat. You are very kind, Your Grace, Adrian, but I must ask, why now, why me? For the first time, a hint of vulnerability crossed the Duke's austere features. My father, the 5th Duke, married for duty. He and my mother existed in a state of cold civility for 40 years, inhabiting the same house yet living entirely separate lives. I vowed never to repeat that pattern. He moved closer, close enough that Eleanor could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, evidence of a life lived in the open air, of expressions that had shaped his countenance over decades rather than the smooth, untested features of youth. When my Catherine died in childbed after just 1 year of marriage, I thought perhaps the solitary path was my destiny. I have not sought female companionship or contemplated remarriage until recently, when certain reflections on mortality prompted reconsideration. His gaze, unwavering yet somehow gentle, held hers. As for why you, Lady Eleanor, I believe in looking beyond surface appearances to the essential character beneath. I have watched you navigate an increasingly hostile social landscape with grace and forbearance. I have observed your kindness to those society overlooks, the elderly dowagers, the wallflowers, the awkward young men forgotten in corners. Such qualities reveal the true nature of a person far more accurately than beauty or accomplishment. The enormity of his proposal seemed to fill the small drawing room, transforming the familiar space into something unknown and slightly daunting. Eleanor found herself at once flattered, bewildered and wary. I cannot give you an answer immediately, she said at last. Such a decision requires consideration. Of course, he agreed readily. I would think less of you if you decided hastily in either direction. Take what time you need, Lady Eleanor. I shall call again in 1 week, if that is acceptable. It is, she replied, composure returning as the conversation moved to more practical grounds. The Duke, Adrian, bowed over her hand once more, this time allowing his lips to brush her gloved knuckles with the lightest of touches. Until then, I remain your most devoted servant. As the door closed behind him, Eleanor sank into the nearest chair, her mind a whirl with possibilities she had long since abandoned. From the street below came the sounds of his carriage departing, the horse's hooves striking a rhythm against the cobblestones that seemed to echo the sudden, unexpected acceleration of her heart. The afternoon light slanted through the windows, catching the pearls at her throat and illuminating them one by one, 32 luminescent spheres, each representing a year of her life. Years that had brought disappointment and loss, yes, but also wisdom and strength. Years that had shaped her into the woman who had just received a proposal from the Duke of Wessex. As she sat motionless in the quiet drawing-room, a folded newspaper that the butler had placed upon the side table earlier caught her eye. The society page was visible, and there in bold type a headline that caused her breath to catch. "Wessex in want of a bride? Duke observed in tender display with aging beauty." The first whispers of scandal had already begun. The morning room at Lady Beatrice Linton's Berkeley Square residence hummed with the particular energy of a ladies' tea gathering, that delicate balance of perfumed civility and razor-sharp scrutiny that defined the feminine sphere of influence in London society. Crystal tinkled against fine porcelain as 6 of the most formidable arbiters of social acceptance in the city sipped Darjeeling and dissected the latest developments among the ton. Lady Eleanor Ashcombe had accepted the invitation with considerable trepidation. In the 3 days since the Duke of Wessex's astonishing call upon her Mayfair home, she had become acutely conscious of altered glances, of conversations that ceased abruptly upon her entrance to a room, of the sudden influx of calling cards from individuals who had previously forgotten her existence. The newspaper notice had been merely the first ripple of what was rapidly becoming a wave of speculation. Now seated on a delicate rosewood chair by the window, Eleanor maintained her composure beneath the weight of 5 pairs of eyes that assessed her with varying degrees of subtlety. Lady Beatrice herself, a sharp-witted young widow whose acerbic tongue was feared in drawing-rooms throughout Mayfair, presided over the silver teapot with calculated graciousness. "More tea, Lady Eleanor?" she inquired, her blue eyes bright with barely concealed curiosity. "Thank you. No," Eleanor replied, her voice betraying none of the discomfort she felt. It was perfection, as always. Lady Claribel Hawthorne, whose crystal laughter had so recently cut through Somerset Hall at Eleanor's expense, now watched her with the fixed attention of a naturalist observing a particularly surprising specimen. The transformation in her manner, from open derision to cautious observation, spoke volumes about the power of the Duke's public attention. "We were just discussing the Winterford ball next week," remarked Lady Amelia Thornley, a matronly figure whose apparent benevolence masked an encyclopedic knowledge of every scandal to grace London in the past 30 years. "I understand you have received an invitation, Lady Eleanor." The question, seemingly innocent, carried the weight of implication. The Winterford ball was the most exclusive event of the autumn season. Invitations were coveted prizes, distributed with ruthless selectivity by the elderly Duchess of Winterford, whose favour could establish or destroy a reputation with equal facility. "Indeed," Eleanor acknowledged, adjusting her gloves with deliberate casualness. "Her Grace was most kind to include me." "Most kind," echoed Lady Claribel, her emphasis subtle yet unmistakable, though perhaps not entirely unexpected given recent developments. A moment of taut silence followed this observation. Eleanor took a careful sip of tea, using the moment to compose her response. "I'm afraid I don't follow your meaning, Lady Claribel." Lady Beatrice intervened with the precision of a fencer, delivering a calculated thrust. "I believe Lady Claribel refers to your rather conspicuous dance with the Duke of Wessex at Somerset Hall, followed by his equally conspicuous call upon your residence 2 days later. Hardly routine social interactions for a gentleman known for his selective engagements." The circle of women shifted subtly, leaning forward with the collective anticipation of predators scenting vulnerability. Eleanor set her teacup down with deliberate care, the porcelain making no sound as it met its saucer. "His Grace was kind enough to rescue me from an uncomfortable situation," she replied, her gaze moving deliberately to Lady Claribel, whose porcelain complexion acquired a becoming flush. "As for his subsequent call, I believe he wished to ensure that the incident had not caused lasting distress." "How thoughtful," murmured Lady Amelia, her tone making the adjective sound distinctly dubious, "and most unusual for a gentleman generally considered immune to social niceties. The Duke's reputation for hard directness is well established." Lady Beatrice arranged her skirts with a rustle of expensive silk, One cannot help but wonder if there might be more substantive matters underlying such attentions. The Duke, after all, has maintained his widowed state for 15 years, despite considerable pressure to secure the succession. To suddenly display such marked interest in society, in specific elements of society, naturally prompts speculation. Eleanor felt the heat rising to her cheeks, despite her determination to maintain composure. Speculation is the lifeblood of drawing rooms, Lady Beatrice, but rarely reflects the simpler truths of actual circumstances. How charmingly put, Lady Beatrice replied, a new note entering her voice, something that might almost have been respect. Though I wonder if you truly believe circumstance to be simple when it involves Adrian Blackwood. The man is a fortress of complications, if rumours are to be credited. Before Eleanor could formulate a response, the drawing-room door opened to admit Lady Beatrice's butler, bearing a silver salver, upon which rested a small package wrapped in fine tissue paper. "A delivery for Lady Ashcombe," he announced with perfect neutrality. The atmosphere in the room crystallized into acute attention. Eleanor accepted the package with outward calm that belied her inner consternation. The wrapping fell away to reveal a single perfect iris, its deep purple petals still bearing the morning dew, accompanied by a card bearing the Wessex crest. "How fascinating," observed Lady Claribel, any pretense of disinterest abandoned. "An iris, the flower of hope and faith. A rather specific message, would you not agree, ladies?" Eleanor unfolded the card with fingers she forced to remain steady, reading the bold script inscribed therein. "In anticipation of our next meeting, A." She refolded the card with deliberate care, before any of the eagerly watching eyes could glimpse its contents. The gesture, however, merely intensified the speculation that now radiated from the assembled women with almost palpable force. "It appears congratulations may be in order," Lady Amelia pronounced, her tone balanced precisely between sincerity and skepticism. "For the receipt of a flower?" Eleanor replied, with a lightness she did not feel. "I fear we have reached a state where the simplest courtesies are interpreted as declarations of intent." Lady Beatrice leaned forward, her gaze unexpectedly direct and free from its usual veil of mockery. "Tell me, Lady Eleanor, do you consider the attentions of the Duke of Wessex to be a simple courtesy?" The question hung in the air, demanding an answer that Eleanor was not prepared to give, not to these women, and perhaps not even to herself. She was saved from immediate response by a commotion in the entryway, followed by the butler's return. "Lord Roderick Vale and Viscount Dallow," he announced, the two gentlemen following close upon his heels with the assurance of regular visitors. The atmosphere shifted perceptibly as the men entered, social masks adjusting with practiced ease. Lady Beatrice rose to greet them with particular warmth, her hand lingering perhaps a moment longer than strictly necessary in Lord Vale's grasp. "What good fortune brings you, gentlemen, to our modest gathering?" she inquired, directing them to seats with the practiced ease of a hostess accustomed to managing social dynamics. "The irresistible prospect of female companionship superior to that available at White's this dreary afternoon," replied Lord Vale, his golden good looks and easy charm casting their usual spell over the room. His gaze, however, lingered upon Eleanor with an intensity that belied his casual manner. Viscount Dallow, slighter and more nervous in demeanour than his friend, offered a bow that managed to be simultaneously correct and faintly mocking. "Indeed, the club is positively funereal today. Even Wessex made only the briefest appearance before departing for some mysterious errand that required him to visit a florist of all places." His gaze flickered meaningfully to the iris still resting in Eleanor's lap. The implication was not lost upon any present. Eleanor felt the weight of collective scrutiny pressing upon her with renewed force. "How diverting to hear of the Duke's horticultural interests," Lady Beatrice observed, signalling for fresh tea to be brought, "though one imagines his vast conservatories at Blackwood Hall would provide ample blooms without requiring personal visits to mere commercial establishments." Lord Vale accepted a cup with practiced grace, his handsome features arranged in an expression of polite interest. Perhaps His Grace sought something specific not available in his own collections. The iris is a notoriously particular flower, demanding precise conditions to flourish. His eyes met Eleanor's across the room, and she was startled by the calculation visible within them, a cold assessment at odds with his charming exterior. Some specimens are particularly valued for their maturity and hardiness, rather than the more common appeal of fresh blooms. The double meaning hung in the air like perfume, too strong to be ignored, too subtle to be directly challenged. Eleanor felt a curious sensation settle over her, a calm born not of comfort, but of the absolute certainty that she was being deliberately baited. "How fortunate, then," she replied with quiet dignity, "that appreciation for such qualities exists. The world would be poorer if only the newest blossoms were deemed worthy of cultivation." Viscount Dallow's thin lips curved into something approximating a smile. "Quite so, Lady Eleanor, though one must wonder at the wisdom of a master gardener who suddenly shifts his attentions from the expected varieties. It prompts questions about motivations." "Does it indeed?" Eleanor met his gaze directly. "How curious that the preferences of others should provoke such intense speculation. One might almost suspect a degree of personal investment in the matter. A flicker of something, annoyance, concern, passed across Lord Vale's features before his smooth mask reasserted itself. "We are all invested in the welfare of our friends, Lady Eleanor. The Duke's choices naturally concern those who hold him in high regard." "And you count yourself among that number, Lord Vale?" The question came not from Eleanor, but from Lady Beatrice, whose sharp gaze had been moving between the participants in this verbal skirmish with increasing interest. "Absolutely," Vale replied without hesitation. "Wessex and I share many common interests and concerns. His happiness is naturally of great importance to me." "How fortunate for His Grace to have such devoted friends," Eleanor observed, her tone perfect in its blandness. "Though I imagine a man of his discernment forms his own judgments, rather than relying upon the opinions of others, however well-intentioned." The exchange might have continued in this vein of polite hostility, had not Lady Amelia intervened with the practiced skill of one who had navigated decades of social undercurrents. "Speaking of gardens," she began, firmly redirecting the conversation, "has anyone visited the new botanical exhibition at Kew? I understand the orchid collection is quite extraordinary this season." The discussion obediently shifted to safer topics, though Eleanor remained acutely conscious of Lord Vale's attention. When the gathering eventually dispersed some 30 minutes later, she found herself descending the steps of Lady Beatrice's residence alongside the young widow herself. "A moment, Lady Eleanor," Beatrice said, drawing her slightly aside as their respective carriages were summoned. "I feel I should offer a word of caution." Eleanor regarded her with wary curiosity. "Caution, Lady Beatrice?" The younger woman's customary sharp-edged manner had softened into something more complex. "Roderick Vale's interest in the Duke's affairs is not as disinterested as he would have you believe. There is history there that you would be wise to investigate before proceeding further with Wessex." "I'm afraid I don't understand your meaning," Eleanor replied carefully. Beatrice glanced toward the street, where Lord Vale and Viscount Dallow were just entering a gleaming curricle. "Just tread carefully, Lady Eleanor. The iris may represent hope, but it also speaks of messages and secrets. Ask yourself what message Wessex truly intends, and what secrets might lie beneath his sudden interest in a woman he has scarcely acknowledged for years." Before Eleanor could respond to this cryptic warning, Lady Beatrice's carriage arrived, and with a quick, formal farewell, she was gone, leaving Eleanor on the steps with the purple iris still in her hand and a growing sense that she had unwittingly stepped into currents far deeper and more dangerous than she had initially perceived. Her own carriage arrived moments later, and as she settled into its comfortable privacy, Eleanor finally allowed her composed expression to falter. The afternoon's events had shaken her more than she cared to admit. The flower, the veiled warnings, Lord Vale's calculating gaze, all suggested complications she had not anticipated when contemplating the Duke's proposal. As the carriage turned onto her quiet Mayfair street, Eleanor caught sight of a tall figure standing before her residence, the unmistakable silhouette of the Duke of Wessex himself, apparently awaiting her return with characteristic directness. Her heart performed a curious little leap that she immediately attempted to subdue with rational thought. The carriage came to a halt. Through the window she could see Adrian Blackwood's face, its austere lines softened by what might almost have been anxiety, an expression so unexpected on his commanding features that Eleanor found herself momentarily transfixed. The footman opened the carriage door. The moment of decision had arrived more swiftly than she had anticipated. As Eleanor gathered her skirts to descend, her fingers closed around the iris, symbol of hope, yes, but also, as Lady Beatrice had warned, of messages and secrets yet to be deciphered. The Duke stood motionless before Eleanor's townhouse, his tall figure a study in controlled anticipation. As her carriage halted, he stepped forward with military precision, offering his hand to assist her descent. "Lady Eleanor," he greeted her. his deep voice carrying the faintest hint of uncertainty, an emotion so foreign to his character that she found herself momentarily disarmed. "Your Grace," she replied, accepting his assistance with outward composure, while her mind raced to comprehend his unexpected presence. "This is a surprise, a presumption, perhaps," he acknowledged, releasing her hand once she stood securely upon the pavement. His gaze fell to the iris still clutched in her other hand. "I see my modest offering found its way to you. At Lady Beatrice's tea-gathering," Eleanor confirmed, acutely conscious of curious glances from passers-by. "A beautiful specimen, though I confess its arrival caused something of a stir among the ladies present." A ghost of a smile touched Adrian's stern mouth. "I imagine it did. May I accompany you inside? There are matters I wish to discuss that would benefit from privacy." Eleanor hesitated only briefly before nodding her assent. Propriety would be satisfied by Martha's presence within, and her own curiosity demanded satisfaction. They proceeded into the house in silence, the butler's carefully neutral expression betraying only the slightest widening of eyes at the Duke's unannounced visit. In the drawing-room, with Martha discreetly positioned by the door with her sewing, Adrian declined the offered seat, instead moving to the window with the restless energy of a man unaccustomed to uncertainty. "I must apologize for this intrusion," he began, turning to face her. "But certain information has reached me that necessitates immediate clarification. You attended Lady Beatrice's gathering today. Were Lord Vale and Viscount Dallow present?" The directness of the question startled her. "Yes, they arrived toward the end of the afternoon. How did you— And did Vale make any specific comments regarding my intentions or character?" The Duke's expression had hardened into something resembling his battlefield countenance. Eleanor studied him carefully, recalling Lady Beatrice's cryptic warning about history between the men. "He expressed concern for your welfare, suggesting that recent changes in your social patterns were unusual." "Concern," Adrian repeated, the word flat with skepticism. "And did this concern extend to specific commentary regarding my interest in you?" A flush rose to Eleanor's cheeks. "There were implications, Your Grace, veiled but unmistakable." Adrian's jaw tightened visibly. "I feared as much. Lady Eleanor, I must inform you of matters I had hoped to address more gradually. Roderick Vale is not a disinterested observer in this situation. He harbors resentments toward me that make his interference both predictable and potentially damaging." "What manner of resentments?" Eleanor asked, her voice steady despite the tumult of her thoughts. The Duke's expression grew distant, as though viewing scenes from a past Eleanor could not access. "Vale's father and mine were bitter rivals. When financial ruin threatened the Vale estate 15 years ago, my father declined to extend assistance. The elder Vale took his own life rather than face disgrace." Eleanor's hand flew to her throat in shock. "That is terrible. But surely you bear no responsibility for your father's decisions?" "In Vale's mind, the distinction between father and son blurred long ago," Adrian replied grimly. "Roderick was 17 when it happened, old enough to swear vengeance, young enough to nurture the grievance into obsession. He has dedicated himself to the systematic dismantling of everything bearing the Wessex name." He moved closer, his blue eyes intent upon her face. "Which brings me to my purpose today. You have become, however unwittingly, a piece in Vale's game against me. Your reputation, your peace of mind, these are now targets for his machinations." Eleanor absorbed this revelation with growing disquiet. "You believe he would deliberately harm me simply to strike at you?" "I know it," Adrian stated with absolute certainty. "Already he plants seeds of doubt regarding my motives in approaching you. Soon will come whispers designed to compromise your standing, suggestions of impropriety perhaps, or questioning your character. Vale's methods are insidious rather than direct." A chill settled over Eleanor, despite the warmth of the fire. "And your solution to this threat, Your Grace? Am I to withdraw from society until Lord Vale finds some other amusement?" "No." The single word carried the weight of iron determination. "That would constitute surrender to Vale's schemes and to society's pettiness. I propose instead an acceleration of our original discussion." He closed the remaining distance between them with 2 decisive steps. "Lady Eleanor, I ask for your hand in marriage, not in a week's time after careful deliberation, but now, today, as a declaration of intent that will shield you from Vale's manipulations and announce unequivocally that you stand under my protection." The boldness of the proposal left Eleanor momentarily speechless. Martha's needle could be heard dropping to the wooden floor in the stunned silence. "Your Grace, Adrian," Eleanor managed finally, "you cannot seriously suggest—" "I am entirely serious," he interrupted, his voice softening as he registered her shock. "I do not propose an immediate ceremony, merely a formal announcement of our engagement. Such a declaration would effectively neutralize Vale's ability to damage your reputation through innuendo." Eleanor turned away, needing physical distance to organize her thoughts. "You speak of our union as a tactical maneuver rather than a life-altering commitment." "I speak of accelerating a proposition I have already made in good faith," Adrian corrected gently. "My reasons for seeking your hand remain unchanged. Your character, your intelligence, your dignity. Vale's interference merely adds urgency to timing, not substance to intent." Outside, the afternoon had begun its surrender to evening, shadows lengthening across the small garden visible through the window. Eleanor watched a late butterfly flit among the last roses, its fragile beauty defiant against the approaching autumn chill. "You place me in an impossible position," she said at last. "To refuse appears prudent, yet ultimately cowardly. To accept seems rash, yet perhaps necessary for self-preservation. Neither choice feels entirely my own." Adrian moved to stand beside her at the window, his reflection appearing beside hers in the glass, the stern aristocratic features softened by genuine concern. "I would give you time if circumstances permitted. That Vale and Dallow sought you out today confirms my fears that they have already set their course." A sudden, disturbing thought occurred to Eleanor. The newspaper notice, was that their doing as well? "Almost certainly," Adrian confirmed. "The society pages have become Vale's preferred weapon. Rumors cultivated there spread with remarkable efficiency." Eleanor turned to face him directly. "If I were to agree to this announcement, what assurance have I that it is not merely expedience that motivates you? That once the immediate threat from Lord Vale subsides, you will not reconsider this match with a woman whom society deems unsuitable?" For the first time, genuine hurt flashed across Adrian's features. "Have I given you reason to doubt my integrity, Lady Eleanor?" "You have given me little opportunity to judge it," she replied honestly. "Our acquaintance spans less than a week. Most of my knowledge of you comes from reputation and observation at a distance." "A fair assessment," he acknowledged after a moment's reflection. "Then perhaps this might serve as testament to my sincerity." From his coat pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box of considerable age, the once rich fabric worn smooth at the edges from handling across generations. Opening it, he revealed a ring of extraordinary beauty, a deep blue sapphire surrounded by diamonds set in platinum, the craftsmanship clearly belonging to an earlier century. "This was my grandmother's betrothal ring," Adrian explained quietly. "It has adorned the hand of every Duchess of Wessex since 1782. I offer it not as a trap or a shield, but as a symbol of genuine intent. Whatever complications Vale introduces, my purpose remains constant. I seek a partner worthy of both the title and my respect." Eleanor gazed at the ring, its deep blue depths seeming to hold mysteries and promises in equal measure. The moment stretched between them, fraught with implications that would reverberate through both their lives. From the street came the sudden clatter of an approaching carriage, followed by voices raised in greeting. Society calling hours were not yet complete. The sound served as a pointed reminder of the world beyond the drawing room, with all its judgments and calculations. "I cannot give you the answer you seek today," Eleanor said at last, her voice low but resolute, "not from fear or indecision, but from respect for the magnitude of what you propose. I ask for 3 days, no more, to consider all aspects of this arrangement. Will you grant me that much?" Adrian closed the ring box with careful fingers, returning it to his pocket. 3 days, he agreed, disappointment evident beneath his composed exterior. "I shall call upon you at this same hour on Friday for your answer." He bowed formally over her hand, his lips barely brushing her knuckles through the glove. "Whatever your decision, Lady Eleanor, know that my regard for you remains unchanged." As he departed, passing the newly arrived visitors in the hallway with formal nods of acknowledgement, Eleanor returned to the window, watching his tall figure stride purposefully toward the waiting carriage. The iris he had sent lay upon the side table, its purple petals catching the last rays of afternoon light, beautiful, defiant against its approaching fate, and utterly transformed by circumstances beyond its control. Like herself, Eleanor reflected, as the carriage bearing the Duke of Wessex disappeared around the corner, leaving her alone with a decision that would irrevocably alter the course of her carefully ordered existence. The crisp October morning brought no clarity to Eleanor's troubled thoughts. For 2 days since the Duke's unexpected proposal, She had moved through her usual routines with outward serenity, while her mind ceaselessly examined the situation from every conceivable angle. Now, with only one day remaining before Adrian would return for her answer, she found herself no closer to certainty. "Another invitation, my lady," Martha announced, entering the breakfast room with a cream-colored envelope embossed with the Winterford crest. "And this letter arrived by private messenger just moments ago." The invitation joined 7 others received in the past 48 hours, a sudden suspicious influx of social attention from quarters that had long ago ceased to acknowledge her existence. The letter, however, bore no identifying marks, save her name inscribed in an unfamiliar feminine hand. "Thank you, Martha," Eleanor said, reaching for the mysterious correspondence with carefully concealed apprehension. Alone again, she broke the plain wax seal and unfolded a single sheet of expensive stationery. The contents, written in elegant script, caused her breath to catch in her throat. "Lady Eleanor Ashcombe, we have not been formally introduced, though our paths have crossed in society. I write with information that you may find pertinent to your current circumstances. It has come to my attention that you are considering an alliance with the Duke of Wessex. Before you commit to such a course, I feel compelled by conscience to share certain facts regarding His Grace's first marriage and the tragic demise of his young Duchess. The official account that Catherine, Duchess of Wessex, died in childbed contains significant omissions. Those who served at Blackwood Hall during that period tell a different tale, of a young bride's mounting despair, of a husband's cold indifference, and of circumstances surrounding her death that raised questions never satisfactorily answered. I do not presume to advise you, Lady Eleanor, but rather to ensure that any decision you make proceeds from complete information rather than partial truths. Should you wish to learn more, I shall be walking in the east section of Hyde Park tomorrow at 11 o'clock. A concerned friend." Eleanor set the letter down with trembling fingers. The implications were as disturbing as they were unexpected, casting a sinister shadow over the Duke's character that contradicted her every impression of the man. Could this be Lord Vale's predicted campaign of whispers, manifesting with unsettling swiftness, or might there be substance to these veiled accusations? She was still contemplating this unwelcome development when Martha reappeared at the doorway, her expression unusually grave. "Sir Thomas Fairborn has called, my lady. He apologizes for the early hour, but insists the matter is of some urgency." Eleanor's surprise deepened. Sir Thomas, the Duke's closest friend and adviser, had never before visited her residence. "Show him in at once, please." Sir Thomas entered moments later, his kind, weathered face bearing signs of recent strain. After exchanging brief pleasantries, he came directly to his purpose with characteristic forthrightness. "Lady Eleanor, I come on my own initiative, though Wessex would likely disapprove of my interference. Rumors have reached me suggesting that certain parties may attempt to influence your decision regarding his proposal through selective disclosure of past events." Eleanor studied him carefully. "You refer to his first marriage." Sir Thomas's expression confirmed her suspicion. "I feared as much. May I inquire as to the nature of what you have heard?" After a moment's deliberation, Eleanor retrieved the anonymous letter, watching Sir Thomas's face darken as he scanned its contents. "Precisely as I feared," he murmured, returning the letter with evident distaste. "A masterful blend of truth, implication, and calculated omission, Lord Vale's specialty." "Then there is no substance to these claims?" Eleanor asked, seeking reassurance yet needing honesty more. Sir Thomas sighed heavily, settling his substantial frame more comfortably in the chair opposite hers. "Lady Eleanor, I have known Adrian Blackwood since we were boys at Eton. I stood beside him at his wedding to Catherine Harrington, and I held him when he wept after her death. I can speak to these matters with both knowledge and affection." He paused, choosing his words with evident care. The Duke's marriage was indeed troubled, though not in the manner this letter suggests. Catherine was just 17 when they wed, beautiful, accomplished, and thoroughly unprepared for the realities of being a duchess. She had expected romantic devotion. She found instead a husband consumed by estate responsibilities and the management of vast holdings. "And his behavior toward her," Eleanor prompted gently. "Never cruel," Sir Thomas stated with absolute conviction. "Distant at times, perhaps, when duties demanded his attention, but I witnessed genuine effort on his part to make the marriage succeed." His expression softened with remembered sorrow. Catherine's melancholy was real, but its roots lay in isolation rather than mistreatment. Blackwood Hall can be overwhelming in its grandeur, and the local society offered little companionship for a young duchess. Eleanor considered this information, finding it aligned more closely with her impression of Adrian than did the letter's insinuations. And her death. The letter implies circumstances beyond childbed complications. Sir Thomas's face grew grave. Her labour came early, during a violent storm that prevented the doctor's timely arrival. Adrian himself rode through the deluge seeking help, leaving Catherine in the care of the midwife and household staff. By the time he returned with medical assistance, both she and the infant were lost. He leaned forward, his honest eyes meeting Eleanor's directly. The tragedy nearly destroyed him, Lady Eleanor. He blamed himself entirely. For her isolation, for his absence when the labour began, for failing to save either his wife or child. That guilt drove him into self-imposed exile from society for nearly 5 years. Yet this letter suggests something more sinister, Eleanor observed, her mind working to reconcile these conflicting narratives. Vale's father began that particular whisper campaign shortly before his suicide, Sir Thomas replied grimly, a final attempt to damage the Wessex name. The suggestion gained no credence at the time, but Vale has evidently resurrected it for his present purposes. Eleanor rose, needing movement to process this troubling information. Why did the Duke not warn me of this himself? Adrian carries his burdens alone, always has, Sir Thomas said with affectionate exasperation, and he would consider it beneath his dignity to defend himself against such accusations. His pride is both his strength and his greatest vulnerability. He stood also, preparing to take his leave. I have perhaps overstepped by coming here, but I could not bear to see a good man's chance at happiness destroyed by malicious falsehoods. Adrian has lived with guilt and loneliness for 15 years, Lady Eleanor. In you, I believe he sees not merely a suitable duchess, but a woman of substance who might understand the man behind the title. These words resonated within Eleanor with unexpected force. Had she not glimpsed beneath Adrian's austere exterior moments of genuine vulnerability and unexpected tenderness? "Thank you for your candour, Sir Thomas," she said, as they moved toward the door. "You have given me much to consider." He bowed over her hand with paternal warmth. "If I may offer one final observation, Lady Eleanor, in 20 years of friendship, I have never seen Adrian act with the urgency and purpose he has displayed since meeting you. Whatever his stated reasons for seeking this match, I suspect his heart has recognized something his rational mind has yet to fully acknowledge." With this parting insight, Sir Thomas departed, leaving Eleanor with new perspectives to incorporate into her increasingly complex deliberations. The anonymous letter lay where she had placed it, its poisonous implications now partially neutralized by Sir Thomas's testimony, yet questions lingered still. Would the truth be found in the park tomorrow at 11 o'clock? Or would that meeting merely entangle her further in Lord Vale's web of manipulation? As Eleanor contemplated her limited options, a knock at the front door echoed through the quiet house. Martha appeared moments later, bearing a small package wrapped in silver paper. "From His Grace, my lady," she announced, presenting it with undisguised curiosity. Within the wrapping, Eleanor found a small leather-bound volume, a collection of Elizabeth Barrett Browning's sonnets, and a note in Adrian's distinctive hand. "Words I lack the courage to speak myself. The 43rd speaks most directly. A." With fingers that trembled slightly, Eleanor turned to the indicated sonnet and read the immortal lines. "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways." The verses blurred before her eyes as unexpected emotion welled within her. This gesture, so at odds with Adrian's practical proposal and stated reasons for seeking her hand, suggested depths of feeling he had not verbally expressed, perhaps could not express, given the constraints of his nature and position. As she closed the small volume, a decision began to crystallize in Eleanor's mind. The Duke had laid before her a logical case for their union. Sir Thomas had provided context for his past. This book offered a glimpse into his closely guarded heart. Tomorrow would bring her final piece of information, this mysterious meeting in Hyde Park, after which her course would be set, for good or ill. She placed the book of sonnets carefully upon her writing desk, its presence a tangible reminder of the complexities underlying what had initially appeared a simple arrangement of mutual convenience. The future Duchess of Wessex would need all her wisdom and courage to navigate the currents that awaited her, beginning with tomorrow's encounter with the anonymous letter-writer. Outside her window, a fine mist had begun to rise from the garden, shrouding the late roses in a veil that concealed as much as it revealed, not unlike the situation in which Eleanor now found herself, poised between revelation and obscurity, certainty and doubt, a carefully ordered past, and an unknowable future. The east section of Hyde Park lay wrapped in autumn's golden melancholy as Eleanor's carriage approached at precisely 11 o'clock. Crimson and amber leaves drifted from ancient oaks, creating a royal carpet across pathways where fashionable London would promenade later in the day. At this early hour, however, the park remained relatively deserted, ideal for clandestine meetings. "Circle back in 30 minutes, Eleanor instructed her coachman as she alighted, parasol in hand despite the cloud-covered sky. The accessory provided not protection from non-existent sunshine, but a measure of distance from whoever awaited her, a barrier, however slight, between herself and potential unpleasantness. She had debated endlessly whether to keep this appointment. Logic suggested avoiding what might well be a trap laid by Lord Vale. Curiosity and a deep-seated need for complete information before making her decision had ultimately prevailed. Whatever awaited her, Eleanor was determined to face it with the same dignity that had sustained her through years of society's gradual dismissal. A solitary female figure stood beside the ornamental lake, her back turned, silhouetted against the misty water. As Eleanor approached, the woman turned, revealing the delicate features of Lady Beatrice Linton, the last person Eleanor had expected to encounter. "Lady Eleanor," Beatrice greeted her, no trace of her usual sharp wit evident in her subdued tone. "I appreciate your coming." "You wrote the anonymous letter," Eleanor stated, pieces falling into place with disquieting rapidity. "Why such secrecy, Lady Beatrice, and what possible interest could you have in my potential marriage to the Duke?" Beatrice gestured toward a secluded bench, partially sheltered by an ancient willow. "Please sit with me. What I have to share requires privacy and delicacy." Wary but determined to hear whatever information might impact her impending decision, Eleanor complied. For several moments, Beatrice remained silent, her gloved fingers twisting nervously in her lap, a display of agitation utterly foreign to her customary composed demeanor. "I have hesitated for days over whether to speak," she began finally. "Convention dictates silence, yet conscience demands otherwise. Before proceeding, I must ask, have you given the Duke your answer regarding his proposal?" "Not yet," Eleanor replied carefully. "That appointment awaits me tomorrow." Relief flickered across Beatrice's features. "Then there is still time. Lady Eleanor, I must first confess something that may colour your perception of what follows. I was once intimately acquainted with Lord Roderick Vale." Eleanor's surprise must have shown in her expression, but Beatrice continued with increased urgency. "It ended some months ago when I discovered the true nature of his character. I tell you this only so you understand that my knowledge comes from direct sources, not mere gossip." "What knowledge, precisely?" Eleanor pressed, growing increasingly uncertain about the wisdom of this meeting. Beatrice drew a steadying breath. "During our association, Vale spoke frequently of his enmity toward the Duke, an obsession that borders on mania. Recently, I learned that he has set in motion a plan designed to destroy Wessex completely, using your connection as its centerpiece." A chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air settled over Eleanor. "Explain, please." "Vale has procured letters, correspondence between the Duke and his late wife," Beatrice revealed, lowering her voice though no one stood within hearing distance. "He intends to manipulate these documents and release them to the press once your engagement is announced, creating a scandal of such magnitude that even Wessex's influence could not contain it." Eleanor's mind raced to comprehend the implications. If these letters exist, how did Lord Vale obtain them, and what could they possibly contain that would create such devastation? As to how, Vale has cultivated a connection with a former servant from Blackwood Hall, Beatrice explained. "Regarding content, I cannot speak with certainty, having not seen them myself. Vale claims they reveal the Duke's coldness and neglect contributed directly to his wife's despair and ultimately her death." "Sir Thomas Fairborn presented quite a different account," Eleanor countered, studying Beatrice's face for signs of deception. "I'm sure he did," Beatrice acknowledged, "and perhaps his version holds more truth. My concern is not which narrative prevails, but that Vale intends to ensure his interpretation becomes public spectacle, with you inevitably cast as either victim or accomplice in the drama he orchestrates." This aligned disturbingly well with Adrian's warnings about Vale's methods. "Why share this with me, Lady Beatrice? What do you gain by betraying Lord Vale's confidence?" Something like genuine emotion flickered across Beatrice's carefully maintained facade. "Perhaps I wish to spare another woman the humiliation I endured upon discovering I had been merely a pawn in Vale's schemes." Or perhaps having observed you these past years maintaining your dignity despite society's cruelties, I find I cannot stomach seeing that dignity sacrificed to a man's vendetta." The sincerity in her voice convinced Eleanor more than any logical argument might have done. "I am grateful for your candor, however difficult it must have been to provide it. My role in this matter concludes with this warning," Beatrice said, rising from the bench with evident relief at having discharged her duty. "What action you take with this information must be your own decision." As Beatrice prepared to depart, a disturbing thought occurred to Eleanor. "Lord Vale, does he know of your intervention here today?" A ghost of Beatrice's usual sardonic smile touched her lips. "Vale believes me still besotted enough to assist in his plans rather than disrupt them. A useful misconception I've carefully maintained while extracting myself from his influence." With a formal nod that acknowledged the unusual alliance they had formed, Beatrice moved away along the leaf-strewn path, soon disappearing around a curve in the walkway. Eleanor remained seated, processing this troubling new information, as a light mist began to fall, beading like tears upon her parasol. Her carriage had not yet returned when the sound of approaching footsteps caught her attention. Looking up, she found herself confronting Lord Roderick Vale himself, his golden hair and handsome features arranged in an expression of apparently genuine concern. "Lady Eleanor," he greeted her with a perfect bow. "What a fortunate coincidence to encounter you in such inclement weather. May I offer you the protection of my umbrella until your carriage returns?" The timing of his appearance was too perfect to be coincidental. Eleanor's suspicions crystallized into certainty. "Thank you, no, Lord Vale. I prefer solitude for my morning constitutional, regardless of weather." If her coldness surprised him, he concealed it masterfully. "As you wish. Though I had hoped for an opportunity to speak with you on a matter of some delicacy. I cannot imagine what matter could exist between us that would require private discussion," Eleanor replied, maintaining rigid composure. Vale's handsome face arranged itself into an expression of sincere concern. "It concerns our mutual acquaintance, the Duke of Wessex. I believe he may have developed certain intentions regarding yourself." "His Grace has made no secret of his regard," Eleanor stated carefully, watching Vale's reaction. A fleeting expression, disappointment, calculation, crossed his features before his mask of solicitude returned. "Then I fear my concerns are well-founded. Lady Eleanor, I speak now not from personal interest but from genuine concern for your welfare. The Duke's attentions, while flattering, may not proceed from the honorable motivations you deserve." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "For you presume both knowledge of His Grace's motivations and concern for what I deserve, Lord Vale. Presumptions that exceed our limited acquaintance." "Not presumption, Lady Eleanor, but painful awareness of Wessex's character," Vale countered smoothly. "Our family's long association has afforded me insights that others lack. The Duke's first marriage provides instructive patterns regarding his treatment of women who enter his sphere." "How interesting that you should mention that particular subject," Eleanor observed, her voice cooling further. "It seems to occupy the thoughts of several parties recently." Vale leaned closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Because those who know the truth cannot in good conscience remain silent while history threatens to repeat itself. Adrian Blackwood entered her marriage with hopes similar to what you might now entertain. She left it in a coffin, her spirit broken long before her body followed." The viciousness of this statement, delivered with such smooth conviction, momentarily robbed Eleanor of response. When she found her voice, it emerged with quiet steel. "Lord Vale, I shall speak plainly. I am aware of your campaign against the Duke, its origins, and its intended course. Whatever grievance exists between your families, I have no desire to become its instrument. I would thank you to exclude me from your calculations henceforth." Shock registered briefly in Vale's blue eyes, before narrowing into something harder and more calculating. "I see Wessex has already poisoned your mind against me. A predictable strategy, though disappointing to encounter in one I had thought possessed of independent judgment." "My judgment remains entirely my own," Eleanor stated firmly, rising from the bench as she spotted her returning carriage. "Formed through observation and information from multiple sources, including your ally, Lady Beatrice, whose loyalty you have evidently overestimated." The mention of Beatrice's name caused visible alarm in Vale's previously composed demeanor. "Beatrice spoke with you? What precisely did she—" "Enough," Eleanor interrupted with quiet finality. "Enough to ensure that whatever scheme you have crafted, involving fabricated letters and manufactured scandal, will meet with far less success than you anticipated." For the first time, Vale's handsome mask slipped completely, revealing the cold rage beneath. "You understand nothing of what you speak. Those letters exist, and their contents would destroy not only Wessex's reputation, but any woman foolish enough to align herself with him. If such letters truly exist, then by all means proceed with your plans," Eleanor challenged, secure now in her growing certainty regarding both men's characters. "I find that truth rarely fears exposure. It is falsehood that requires elaborate schemes and coercion." Her carriage drew to a halt nearby. Eleanor moved toward it with measured dignity, turning back to deliver a final observation. "You have made a critical error, Lord Vale, in selecting me as your instrument. Unlike Adrian Blackwood, I am not a naive girl of 17, but a woman of 32 who has weathered society's judgment and emerged intact. Whatever storms you intend to unleash will require greater force than you imagine to break my resolve." Vale's response came in a harsh whisper as she passed him. "We shall see, Lady Eleanor. The game has scarcely begun." The carriage door closed behind her with satisfying finality, shutting out Vale's venomous presence. As the vehicle pulled away, Eleanor caught a glimpse of his face through the window, handsome features contorted with thwarted rage, revealing the true nature that his charm typically concealed. The encounter had shaken her more than she cared to admit, yet paradoxically, it had clarified her thoughts regarding the Duke's proposal. The very vehemence of Vale's opposition suggested that Adrian Blackwood was indeed a man of substance, one whose integrity posed such threat to Vale's schemes that extraordinary measures were deemed necessary to destroy him. Eleanor's decision crystallized with sudden clarity as the carriage turned toward home. Tomorrow, when Adrian called for her answer, she would provide it, not from fear of Vale's machinations or capitulation to social pressure, but from confidence in her own judgment regarding the Duke's character. Whatever consequences followed, they would face them together. The aging spinster and the austere Duke united perhaps initially by pragmatism, but increasingly, Eleanor acknowledged to herself, by something that might, given time and trust, deepen into genuine affection. The thought brought unexpected warmth to her cheeks as the carriage continued its journey through the misty London streets, bearing her toward a future that had transformed in the space of a week from predictable solitude to uncharted possibility. The grand ballroom of Winterford House blazed with the light of 1,000 candles, their flames multiplied infinitely in gilt-framed mirrors that lined the walls. London's elite had assembled in unprecedented numbers, drawn by rumours of an announcement that promised to be the most significant social development of the season. The elderly Duchess of Winterford herself, enthroned like a monarch upon a velvet chair at the head of the room, surveyed her domain with the satisfaction of one who had orchestrated the perfect spectacle. 2 weeks had passed since Eleanor had given her answer to the Duke of Wessex, a simple yes that had transformed her life with breathtaking swiftness. The announcement of their engagement had indeed created the sensation Adrian had predicted, though the reactions had been more complex than either had anticipated. Disbelief had given way to speculation, which in turn had yielded to a curious recalibration of Eleanor's social standing. Invitations had flooded her previously quiet household. Former acquaintances had rediscovered her existence with remarkable enthusiasm. Shopkeepers who once barely acknowledged her now bowed with obsequious deference. Remarkable how a title, even one not yet conferred, alters perception, Eleanor had observed dryly to Adrian during one of their daily meetings, carefully chaperoned promenades through Hyde Park that had become the subject of considerable observation and comment. "Not your perception," he had replied with that rare, transformative smile that still caught her unawares. "You remain refreshingly immune to the seductions of rank and consequence." Now, as Eleanor stood beside her betrothed at the entrance to the Winterford ballroom, she felt the weight of hundreds of eyes upon them, assessing, calculating, measuring the unlikely couple against society's rigid standards. Her gown, an elegant creation of midnight blue silk with silver embroidery that echoed the Wessex colours, had been Adrian's insistence, despite her protests regarding extravagance. "A duchess must look the part," he had stated in that tone which brooked no argument, particularly when facing those who would question her worthiness for the role. The Duchess of Winterford rose with surprising agility for one of her advanced years, extending bejewelled hands in greeting. "Your Grace, Lady Eleanor, how delighted we are that you could honour us with your presence." "The honour is ours, Your Grace," Adrian replied with formal correctness, though Eleanor detected the faintest hint of irony beneath the words. They both knew that their attendance was the central attraction of the evening, that the Duchess's sudden warmth stemmed from calculation rather than genuine affection. "We are all anticipating your special announcement," the elderly hostess continued, her rheumy eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Such a delightful surprise for the season." "Indeed," Adrian responded neutrally, "though I believe the formal announcement in the Times satisfied that particular purpose some days ago." As they moved away, Eleanor murmured, "She expected us to make the announcement here. She expected to preside over our moment of declaration," Adrian confirmed quietly. "The Duchess has orchestrated social spectacles for 4 decades. It disappoints her to be denied the opportunity." They progressed through the crowded room, acknowledging greetings with practiced grace. Eleanor noted with private satisfaction that Lady Claribel Hawthorne and her circle now watched her, with expressions of wary respect rather than dismissive amusement. Even more gratifying was Sir Thomas Fairbairn's warm, paternal smile of approval as they passed, his honest face radiating genuine pleasure at their united presence. The orchestra struck up a waltz, the traditional opening dance that, by custom, featured the highest-ranking couple present. With a formal bow that nonetheless conveyed genuine regard, Adrian led Eleanor to the center of the floor. "Nervous?" he inquired as they took their positions, his hand settling at her waist with proper distance yet reassuring strength. "Terrified," Eleanor admitted with the honesty that had become the foundation of their evolving relationship. "Half the assembly waits for me to stumble, the other half expects you to regret your choice before the evening concludes." "Then we shall disappoint them all," Adrian replied, his blue eyes warming with unexpected tenderness as the music began. They moved together with surprising harmony, for a couple whose physical interactions had been limited by propriety and circumstance. Eleanor, who had not danced regularly for several seasons, found her body remembering steps long unpracticed, guided by Adrian's confident lead. "You dance beautifully," he observed as they executed a particularly complex turn, yet another quality unremarked by society's superficial assessment. "I had excellent instruction in my youth," Eleanor replied, though few opportunities to demonstrate the results in recent years. Their conversation continued in this vein, light yet meaningful, allowing glimpses of their private selves beneath the public performance. Eleanor gradually became aware that they had become the sole focus of the assembly's attention, their every movement and exchange observed with avid curiosity. As the waltz concluded, Adrian retained her hand a moment longer than strict propriety dictated. "Courage, Eleanor," he murmured. "The battle commences in earnest now." She barely had time to wonder at this cryptic statement before understanding dawned. Lord Roderick Vale and Viscount Dallow had entered the ballroom, their arrival creating a ripple of anticipation among those aware of the enmity between Vale and the Duke. Eleanor felt Adrian's hand tighten momentarily around hers before he released it with reluctance. "As we discussed," he reminded her quietly as they moved toward the refreshment area, "we proceed according to plan, regardless of provocation." The plan had been formulated during long conversations at Eleanor's townhouse, a strategy to neutralize Vale's threatened scandal before it could erupt. Adrian had been initially reluctant to involve Eleanor directly, preferring to shield her from ugliness. She had firmly insisted on full partnership in confronting their adversary. "If I am to be your Duchess," she had stated with quiet determination, "I must stand beside you in difficulties as well as triumphs. I will not be sheltered like a child or an invalid." His expression in that moment, surprise giving way to profound respect, had confirmed the wisdom of her insistence. They had become true allies, their formal engagement evolving gradually into a deeper connection neither had initially anticipated. Lord Vale's approach was precisely as they had predicted, a serpentine progression through the crowd that brought him seemingly by chance to their vicinity. His handsome face wore a mask of polite congratulation that did nothing to disguise the calculation in his eyes. "Your Grace," he greeted Adrian with a bow, calibrated to the exact minimum demanded by protocol. "Lady Eleanor, my felicitations on your unexpected betrothal." "Lord Vale," Adrian acknowledged with glacial courtesy, "your sentiment is noted if not particularly credited." Vale's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "One must observe the social niceties, regardless of private reservations. Speaking of observation, I recently came into possession of certain documents that might interest you, Your Grace. Family correspondence of a delicate nature." "How fascinating," Adrian replied with deadly calm. "I presume you refer to the letters you claim passed between myself and my late wife." A flicker of surprise crossed Vale's features at this direct confrontation. "Not claim, Your Grace. Possess. Letters that paint a rather different picture of your first marriage than the sanitized version society accepted. Letters which, even if genuine, would have been obtained through criminal means," Adrian observed, his voice pitched to carry no further than their immediate circle. "Theft, I believe, remains prosecutable regardless of the thief's social standing." Vale's confidence faltered momentarily before he regained composure. The provenance of documents becomes irrelevant when their contents reveal matters of public interest. Your treatment of the late Duchess, for instance, a cautionary tale your current betrothed might wish to consider. Eleanor stepped forward slightly, drawing Vale's attention. "Lord Vale, your concern for my welfare comes rather late, considering your prior contribution to my public humiliation. I suggest you speak plainly or not at all." Vale's eyes narrowed at her unexpected intervention. "Very well, Lady Eleanor. Plainly, I possess letters demonstrating that the Duke's neglect and emotional cruelty drove his young wife to such despair that her death, while technically from childbed complications, was in essence a welcome release from an unbearable marriage. These letters will become public should this ill-advised engagement proceed to matrimony." "A serious accusation," Eleanor replied with remarkable composure. "One wonders why you would delay such revelation if genuine concern for my welfare motivated you." "Strategic timing enhances impact," Vale admitted with chilling candor. "The scandal will destroy Wessex completely once you are irrevocably bound to him. Your reputation will be collateral damage, regrettable but unavoidable." Adrian's expression had hardened to granite as Vale spoke. "You have revealed your hand rather completely, Roderick. Your father would be disappointed by such tactical clumsiness." Vale's handsome face contorted briefly with fury at the mention of his father. "My father would understand that justice delayed is not justice denied. The Wessex legacy will end in disgrace, as the Vale legacy nearly did through your father's cruelty." "If we are to invoke fathers and their sins," Adrian replied with dangerous softness, "perhaps we should speak of yours more comprehensively, particularly regarding certain financial irregularities that precipitated his final crisis." A subtle change had come over the ballroom during this exchange. Eleanor became aware that conversations nearby had quieted, attention shifting toward their confrontation with the heightened awareness of social predators scenting conflict. The Duchess of Winterford herself had maneuvered closer, her ancient face alight with anticipation of scandal. The moment had arrived. The public confrontation they had anticipated and prepared for, though its timing was somewhat earlier than expected. Eleanor met Adrian's eyes briefly, receiving his slight nod of confirmation before she spoke. "Lord Vale," she said clearly, her voice carrying in the suddenly attentive silence, "if you indeed possess such letters, I suggest you produce them now, before witnesses of unimpeachable character who might authenticate their contents." The direct challenge caught Vale momentarily off guard. "This is hardly the venue for such examination, Lady Eleanor." "On the contrary," Adrian interjected smoothly, "what better setting than among society's most discerning members? Unless, of course, the letters cannot withstand scrutiny by those who might recognize discrepancies in handwriting, paper, or content." Vale's composure slipped further as the trap became apparent. Around them the crowd had grown, drawn by the escalating tension and unusual directness of the exchange. "The letters are not currently in my possession," he admitted with visible reluctance. "They are secured elsewhere for safekeeping." "How remarkably convenient," Eleanor observed. "One might almost suspect their existence to be as insubstantial as the accusations they supposedly contain." Vale's eyes darted between them, recognition dawning that his carefully orchestrated scheme was unraveling before it could fully deploy. With a final venomous glare, he retreated into the crowd, Viscount Dallow following in his wake like a shadow separated from its source. The assembled onlookers, denied the explosive confrontation they had anticipated, gradually dispersed, though the air remained charged with speculation and unresolved tension. Eleanor released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "The first skirmish goes to us," Adrian murmured, offering his arm to lead her toward the terrace doors, "though the war is far from concluded." As they stepped into the cool night air, momentarily escaping the overheated ballroom and its watchful occupants, Eleanor felt a curious lightness despite the gravity of their situation. For the first time in her adult life, she stood as an equal participant rather than a sidelined observer in society's complex machinations. "Vale will regroup and attempt another approach," she observed, accepting the glass of champagne Adrian procured from a passing footman. "Undoubtedly," he agreed, his stern features softened by moonlight and something that might have been admiration, but he now faces an adversary he failed to properly assess. His gaze held hers with unexpected warmth. "As did I initially. Your composure under fire was remarkable." Eleanor felt a flush rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the champagne. "Necessity breeds capability, Your Grace." "Adrian," he corrected gently, "at least when we stand beyond society's immediate scrutiny." "Adrian," she amended, the name still unfamiliar upon her tongue, despite their formal engagement. A comfortable silence settled between them as they contemplated the moonlit gardens below the terrace. "3 weeks until our wedding," Adrian observed after a moment, his tone carefully neutral. "Are you certain, Eleanor? There is still time to reconsider, should Vale's threats give you pause." She turned to study his profile, austere and commanding, even in repose. "Do you wish me to reconsider?" "I wish you to proceed with complete awareness of the consequences," he replied honestly. "Vale will not relent. The scandal he threatens may well materialize in some form, regardless of our precautions. As my wife, you will face scrutiny and judgment far beyond what you have previously endured." Eleanor considered his words carefully before responding. "I have spent years as an object of pity and occasional ridicule, my worth diminished with each passing season. Whatever challenges await me as your Duchess, they will be faced from a position of strength and purpose, rather than passive endurance." Something in Adrian's expression shifted, a subtle softening around eyes more accustomed to commanding than revealing. "You are an extraordinary woman, Eleanor Ashcombe." Before she could respond to this unexpected compliment, the terrace doors opened to admit Sir Thomas Fairborn, his honest face grave with urgency. "Wessex," he said without preamble, "Vale has departed abruptly with Dallow in tow." Their expressions suggested purpose rather than retreat. Adrian straightened, immediately alert. "Has Crispin returned to town?" "Yesterday," Sir Thomas confirmed, "currently residing at his townhouse on Curzon Street." A look of understanding passed between the men that left Eleanor momentarily excluded. Adrian turned to her with regret evident in his expression. "I must attend to a matter of some urgency," he explained. "Sir Thomas will escort you home when you wish to depart." "What matter?" Eleanor inquired, unwilling to be dismissed like a child from adult concerns. Adrian hesitated, then answered with characteristic directness. "Viscount Crispin has recently returned from Somerset, where certain ledgers pertaining to Vale's father's final financial transactions were stored in the county archives. I have reason to believe these documents contain evidence that would decisively counter Vale's narrative regarding our father's relationship." "Then I shall accompany you," Eleanor stated firmly. "If these documents affect our shared future, I have a right to be present when they are secured." Adrian's immediate impulse to refuse was visible in his expression. Equally apparent was his reconsideration as he studied her resolute countenance. "It may involve confrontation," he warned, "potentially unpleasant." "I have faced unpleasantness before," she reminded him with quiet dignity, "and emerged intact." After a moment's further consideration, Adrian nodded his acceptance. "Very well, but you must promise to withdraw immediately should the situation become volatile." Eleanor agreed, though privately she reserved the right to exercise her own judgment should circumstances demand it. As the three of them moved discreetly toward a side exit, avoiding the crowded ballroom, she was conscious of crossing yet another threshold in her transformation from overlooked spinster to the future Duchess of Wessex, a woman prepared to defend not only her own dignity, but the legacy she would soon share with the remarkable man by her side. The carriage journey to Viscount Crispin Dallow's Curzon Street residence proceeded in tense silence, broken only by Sir Thomas's occasional updates on their route and the surrounding traffic. Eleanor, seated beside Adrian, felt the coiled tension in his body without needing physical contact to perceive it. Whatever lay ahead clearly represented a culmination of the conflict that had simmered between him and Lord Vale for decades. "These ledgers," she ventured as they turned onto Curzon Street, the fashionable houses now dark except for servants' lights and occasional illuminated windows suggesting late gatherings. "What precisely do they contain that could neutralize Vale's threats?" Adrian's gaze remained fixed on the passing streetscape, his profile sharp in the intermittent glow of street lamps. "Evidence that the elder Vale's financial collapse resulted not from my father's refusal of assistance, but from his own embezzlement of funds entrusted to his management, including substantial amounts belonging to the Wessex estates." Eleanor absorbed this revelation with growing understanding. So your father's refusal to extend further credit was not callous abandonment of a friend, as Roderick has always claimed, Adrian confirmed grimly, but the necessary protection of family resources already damaged by Vale's deceptions. My father discovered the theft shortly before Vale took his life, too late to prevent substantial losses, but in time to avoid complete financial ruin. And these ledgers would prove this conclusively? They contain the original entries in Vale's own hand, subsequently altered to conceal discrepancies. A forensic examination would reveal the fraud beyond question. The carriage slowed as they approached an elegant townhouse, distinguished by its classical portico and imposing black door. A light burned in an upper window, confirming occupancy despite the late hour. Crispin's study, Sir Thomas identified, nodding toward the illumination. The ledgers would likely be secured there, assuming Vale hasn't already retrieved them. Adrian's expression hardened as he assisted Eleanor from the carriage. Vale's desire for revenge has consistently clouded his strategic judgment. He will have gone first to secure his fabricated letters, believing them the more powerful weapon. The ledgers would be secondary in his calculation. The trio approached the house with deliberate purpose, bypassing the main entrance in favor of a smaller side door that led, Eleanor presumed, to the service areas. Adrian produced a key from his waistcoat pocket, answering her unspoken question with grim efficiency. Crispin's personal valet maintains certain vices that require regular financial support. His loyalty is proportional to compensation offered. The door opened silently to Adrian's key, admitting them to a narrow corridor dimly lit by a single wall sconce. Eleanor gathered her skirts to navigate the confined space, conscious of the impropriety of their intrusion, yet equally aware of its necessity. They ascended a service staircase in single file, emerging into a more elegantly appointed hallway that Eleanor assumed connected the main rooms of the upper floor. Light spilled from beneath a door at the corridor's end, accompanied by the murmur of voices, one raised in apparent agitation, the other responding with smoother cadence. Adrian motioned for silence as they approached, positioning Eleanor slightly behind himself, in a protective gesture she might have resented under different circumstances. The agreement was clear, Roderick, came Viscount Dallow's distinctive voice, pitched higher than usual with evident anxiety. I secure the ledgers, you handle the letters and their deployment, a division of labor with proportional rewards. Circumstances have changed, replied Lord Vale's colder tones. Wessex and the Ashcombe woman have somehow anticipated our strategy. The letters alone may prove insufficient leverage. But to alter our arrangement at this late stage, our arrangement, Vale interrupted with cutting precision, was always subject to modification as needed. The ledgers provide insurance should the letters fail to achieve their purpose. I require both. A moment of tense silence followed this declaration. When Dallow spoke again, his voice carried an edge of desperation, poorly disguised as reason. Consider, Roderick, that holding the ledgers in reserve creates secondary leverage. Should Wessex somehow neutralize the threat of the letters, we retain additional means to pressure him. Surrendering both weapons simultaneously leaves us strategically vulnerable. The argument, while self-serving, contained undeniable logic. Eleanor glanced at Adrian, noting the calculation in his expression as he evaluated their options. With a decisive nod, he signaled their advance, pushing open the study door without announcement or ceremony. The scene within froze in tableau. Lord Vale, standing beside an open safe, concealed behind a sliding bookshelf panel, several leather-bound volumes clutched in his arms. Viscount Dallow at his desk, hands spread upon scattered papers in evident dismay, both men's expressions transforming from shock to outrage at the intrusion. A compelling discussion of strategy, Adrian observed with deadly calm, entering the room with measured steps. Though perhaps lacking in fundamental ethical considerations, Vale recovered first, his handsome features arranging themselves into a mask of indignation. Breaking and entering Wessex, a curious approach for one so concerned with legal niceties. A necessary response to theft and extortion, Adrian countered evenly. Those ledgers are evidence in potential legal proceedings. Their removal constitutes interference with judicial process. Legal proceedings that will never materialize, Vale responded with cold certainty. Not if you wish to preserve what remains of your family's reputation. Eleanor moved forward to stand beside Adrian rather than behind him, her action drawing Vale's contemptuous attention. Lady Eleanor, he acknowledged with mocking formality. How disappointing to find you participating in such undignified activities. One expected better judgment, even from a woman desperate enough to accept Wessex's calculated proposal. Desperation suggests lack of alternatives, Lord Vale, Eleanor replied with composed dignity. My acceptance of His Grace's proposal resulted from informed choice rather than necessity, a distinction your limited understanding of female autonomy perhaps cannot comprehend. Vale's expression darkened at this direct challenge. Your informed choice might benefit from additional information. The letters in my possession are fabrications, Adrian interrupted flatly, created through selective editing and outright forgery to present a narrative that serves your vendetta rather than historical truth. You cannot prove such allegations, Vale countered, though Eleanor detected the first hint of uncertainty beneath his confident exterior. Perhaps not, Adrian acknowledged, but I can establish the fraudulent nature of your central claim regarding my father's treatment of yours. Those ledgers you currently clutch provide conclusive evidence that your father systematically embezzled Wessex funds over a period of 7 years, a betrayal of trust that precipitated his financial collapse when discovered. Viscount Dallow's nervous gaze darted between the adversaries, his natural cowardice evidently battling with self-interest. Roderick, he ventured tentatively, perhaps we should consider— Silence, Vale snapped without looking at his confederate. To Adrian he said with dangerous softness, you would destroy my father's memory to protect your own. I would establish truth against deliberate falsehood, Adrian corrected, a distinction apparently lost in your obsession with revenge. The tension in the room had become nearly unbearable, the air charged with decades of accumulated grievance and the immediate threat of physical confrontation. Eleanor observed Vale's rigid posture, the whitening of his knuckles as he clutched the ledgers, the calculation in his eyes as he evaluated potential courses of action. Even if these ledgers contain what you claim, Vale said at length, his voice controlled despite the evident strain, exposing them would create mutual destruction. Your father's reputation would suffer for having trusted mine so completely. The Wessex name would be tainted by association with financial scandal. A risk I am prepared to accept, Adrian stated with finality. The question remains whether you possess similar courage regarding your father's legacy. A tense silence followed this challenge. Eleanor found herself holding her breath, acutely aware that the outcome of this confrontation would shape not only her future with Adrian, but the social landscape they would subsequently navigate. The tableau might have continued indefinitely, had Sir Thomas not chosen that moment to clear his throat pointedly from the doorway. I believe, he observed with deliberate casualness, that Commissioner Hardwicke of Scotland Yard would find this situation most interesting. Having just delivered him home from the Athenaeum Club, I can assure you he remains awake and available should his professional services be required. This introduction of potential legal consequences shifted the atmosphere perceptibly. Viscount Dallow's already pale complexion acquired a distinctly greyish tinge. Roderick, he said with undisguised panic, this escalation benefits none of us. Surely some accommodation— Accommodation, Vale repeated, the word laden with contempt. His gaze locked with Adrian's in silent warfare, before abruptly, unexpectedly, his posture relaxed. Perhaps Crispin displays wisdom despite his usual limitations. Mutual destruction serves neither family's interests. He moved deliberately to place the ledgers on Dallow's desk, his movements precise and controlled. A proposal, then. I retain the letters, you retain the ledgers. Neither weapon is deployed, a stalemate rather than assured destruction. Adrian considered this offer with characteristic thoroughness, his expression revealing nothing of his internal calculations. And Lady Eleanor, your campaign against her reputation ceases immediately and permanently. Vale's gaze shifted to Eleanor, cold assessment giving way to grudging acknowledgement. The lady has demonstrated unexpected fortitude. I withdraw any planned actions regarding her standing or history. Insufficient, Adrian stated flatly. I require the letters, all copies, as demonstration of good faith. For a moment, it appeared Vale would refuse this demand. Then, with deliberate movements that suggested internal struggle rather than easy acquiescence, he withdrew an envelope from his coat pocket. The originals, he said, placing them beside the ledgers. Copies exist elsewhere as insurance against betrayal. As do duplicate ledger entries, Adrian countered smoothly, ensuring mutual deterrence rather than merely shifted advantage. A silence fell as each man evaluated the proposed détente. Eleanor, watching Vale's face with careful attention, observed the gradual relinquishment of his long-held purpose. Not complete surrender, but the reluctant acceptance of stalemate where victory had been anticipated. "It seems we reach accord through mutual capacity for destruction," Vale observed at length, his tone suggesting this outcome simultaneously disappointed and relieved him. "Though I wonder, Wessex, if you have considered what your bride will make of these revelations regarding our father's entangled histories." Adrian turned to Eleanor, something approaching vulnerability visible in his expression for perhaps the first time in their acquaintance. "Lady Eleanor has demonstrated discernment regarding character that exceeds most of her contemporaries. I trust her judgment in this, as in all matters affecting our shared future." The significance of this statement, its public acknowledgement of her as equal partner rather than subordinate consort, was not lost on anyone present. Eleanor felt its weight settle upon her, with both responsibility and unexpected warmth. "A touching display of confidence," Vale remarked with residual sarcasm, though the edge had dulled noticeably from his earlier venom. "One hopes it proves warranted in the years ahead." "It will," Eleanor stated with quiet certainty, meeting his gaze directly. "As will His Grace's decision to accept this compromise, rather than pursue the complete destruction your actions might otherwise justify." Vale's eyebrows rose slightly at this direct address. After a moment's consideration, he offered her the barest suggestion of a respectful nod. "Perhaps Wessex has chosen more wisely than I initially credited. Surprising, but not entirely displeasing to discover. The confrontation had reached its conclusion, not with dramatic flourish, but with the measured calculation of adversaries recognizing mutual interest in de-escalation. As Adrian gathered the ledgers and letters, securing them within his coat, Eleanor observed a subtle shift in the room's atmosphere, not friendship or reconciliation, but the establishment of boundaries that all parties recognized as provisionally inviolable. Their departure from Viscount Dallow's residence proceeded without further incident, the trio returning to Adrian's waiting carriage in silence that reflected the gravity of what had transpired, rather than discomfort between them. As the carriage moved away from Curzon Street, Sir Thomas broke the contemplative quiet. "A satisfactory resolution. All things considered, Vale's capability for mischief has been significantly curtailed." "Temporarily," Adrian qualified, though without his earlier tension. "Roderick's nature remains fundamentally unchanged. We have achieved armistice rather than peace." His gaze turned to Eleanor, seated beside him in the carriage's intimate confines. "I must apologize for involving you in this unpleasantness. It was neither my intention nor my wish that you should witness such ugliness so directly." "On the contrary," Eleanor replied with measured certainty, "my presence was essential, not merely as observer, but as participant in matters that affect our shared future. I neither require nor desire sheltering from realities, however unpleasant they may be." Something shifted in Adrian's expression, respect deepening into something more complex that Eleanor was not yet prepared to name. "You continue to surprise me, Eleanor Ashcombe. A quality I hope to maintain throughout our marriage," she responded with unexpected lightness, the tension of the evening's events gradually yielding to cautious optimism regarding their resolution. Sir Thomas observed this exchange with poorly concealed satisfaction. "I believe," he remarked with deliberate casualness, "that this evening marks a turning point in more respects than the obvious. The future Duchess of Wessex has proven herself admirably suited to the challenges accompanying the title." As the carriage continued its journey through London's darkened streets, Eleanor found herself contemplating this assessment with growing conviction. The path ahead remained complex, fraught with potential difficulties both anticipated and unforeseen. Yet for perhaps the first time since accepting Adrian's proposal, she felt not merely resigned to her chosen course, but genuinely confident in her capacity to navigate it successfully. The Winterford ball, with its intended social triumph, seemed distant and somewhat trivial in comparison to the genuine victory they had achieved this night. Not the public validation of society's approval, but the more substantive accomplishment of confronting genuine threat and emerging intact, their alliance strengthened rather than compromised by shared adversity. As Adrian's hand found hers in the carriage's shadowed interior, his touch conveying reassurance and gratitude without need for words, Eleanor acknowledged to herself what had gradually become undeniable. Her acceptance of his proposal, initially motivated by pragmatic considerations, had evolved into something far more profound, a connection based on mutual respect and growing affection that promised a partnership exceeding her most optimistic expectations. The The carriage turned onto the familiar street leading to her townhouse, its modest facade representing the final evening she would spend as merely Lady Eleanor Ashcombe. Tomorrow would bring final preparations, the day following her transformation into the Duchess of Wessex. The thought brought not anxiety, but a surprising sense of readiness, as though the evening's events had confirmed not only Adrian's worthiness as her chosen partner, but her own capacity to assume the responsibilities awaiting her. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, not as protector and protected, but as genuine allies navigating life's complexities with shared purpose and growing mutual regard. The gardens of Blackwood Hall basked in the golden light of late afternoon, autumn's glory having transformed the landscape into a tapestry of crimson, amber, and burnished gold. A year had passed since Eleanor had become the Duchess of Wessex, a year marked by adjustments both anticipated and unexpected, challenges overcome, and a deepening connection between herself and the man who had transformed her life with his unexpected proposal. Eleanor moved along the gravel path that wound through formal parterres, now softened by the changing season, her steps unhurried as she savoured the rare opportunity for solitary reflection. The massive stone edifice of Blackwood Hall rose behind her, no longer the intimidating fortress it had appeared on her first arrival as a bride, but the home she had gradually made her own through quiet determination and thoughtful innovation. The household staff, initially wary of their new mistress, this woman of 32, who had replaced the memory of a girl of 17, now regarded her with genuine respect, bordering on affection. Her management of the estate's charitable endeavours had won the loyalty of tenant farmers and villagers. Her dignified yet approachable manner had silenced initial skepticism among neighbouring gentry. Even in London, where she and Adrian maintained a presence during parliamentary sessions, the whispers that had initially accompanied their appearances had gradually subsided. Lord Vale, true to the agreement reached that pivotal night, had redirected his considerable energies toward political ambitions rather than personal vendetta. Their paths crossed occasionally in society, the exchanges marked by formal correctness rather than obvious hostility, a détente that served all parties' interests. "I thought I might find you here," came Adrian's deep voice from behind her, drawing Eleanor from her reflections. She turned to find her husband approaching along the garden path, his tall figure silhouetted against the late afternoon sun. The year had softened certain aspects of his stern demeanour, not diminishing his natural authority, but tempering it with more frequent displays of the warmth and consideration he had previously reserved for private moments. "The gardens are particularly beautiful at this hour," Eleanor observed as he reached her side. "I find myself drawn to them when thoughts require ordering." Adrian's keen gaze studied her expression with the attentiveness that had become characteristic of their relationship. "And what thoughts occupy the Duchess this afternoon?" "Reflections on the year past," she replied honestly. "The journey from that first meeting at Somerset Hall to our present circumstances." A smile touched Adrian's mouth, an expression that had become less rare in recent months. A considerable distance travelled in multiple respects. "Indeed," Eleanor resumed walking, Adrian falling into step beside her with the comfortable synchronicity they had developed. "When I accepted your proposal, I anticipated certain challenges: social adjustment, the responsibilities of the title, the management of a household this size. I did not foresee how thoroughly the experience would transform my understanding of myself." "In what manner?" Adrian inquired, genuine interest evident in his tone. Eleanor considered before responding, her hand absently touching the pearl necklace that remained her signature adornment, despite access to the considerable Wessex jewel collection. "I had become accustomed to viewing myself through society's dismissive lens, seeing limitation and fading relevance where I might have recognized experience and capacity. Our marriage required me to reconsider that perspective entirely." They reached a stone bench positioned to catch the afternoon sun, its surface warmed despite the autumn chill. Seating herself, Eleanor continued her reflection as Adrian joined her, his larger frame maintaining a respectful distance that nonetheless conveyed attentiveness. "The irony, perhaps, is that society's recalibration of my worth upon becoming your Duchess mattered far less than I might have anticipated. The external validation I once craved has become largely irrelevant compared to the satisfaction of genuine purpose and partnership." Adrian's expression revealed complex emotion, pride mingled with something deeper that had gradually emerged between them over the months of shared life. "You have exceeded every expectation, Eleanor. The household flourishes under your management, The tenants speak your name with genuine affection. Even my sister, who approached your arrival with considerable skepticism, now counts you among her closest confidants. The mention of Adrian's formidable sister, Lady Margaret Harrington, brought a smile to Eleanor's lips. Their initial awkward introduction had evolved through mutual respect into genuine friendship that neither had anticipated. "And what of the Duke's expectations?" Eleanor inquired, allowing a hint of playfulness to enter her tone. "Have they been similarly met or exceeded?" Adrian's response came after thoughtful consideration, characteristic of his measured approach to significant matters. "When I proposed our union, I outlined practical considerations: compatibility, mutual respect, shared values. What I did not articulate, perhaps could not then acknowledge even to myself, were certain hopes that extended beyond practicality." "What manner of hopes?" Eleanor prompted gently, sensing the rare vulnerability beneath his carefully chosen words. Adrian's gaze held hers with unexpected intensity. "That mutual respect might evolve into deeper understanding. That compatibility might foster genuine connection. That what began as reasoned choice might develop emotional dimensions neither of us initially sought or expected." The directness of this acknowledgement, so contrary to Adrian's customary reserve regarding personal sentiment, momentarily silenced Eleanor. Their marriage had indeed evolved beyond its practical origins, the initial formality gradually yielding to genuine affection expressed through small kindnesses, thoughtful considerations, and increasing moments of shared understanding that required no verbal articulation. "I believe," she replied carefully, "that hopes extending beyond practicality have found reasonable fulfillment for both participants in our arrangement." A rare, transformative smile illuminated Adrian's austere features. "Reasonable fulfillment, a characteristically measured assessment, my dear." "Accuracy in expression remains important," Eleanor observed, returning his smile with one of equal warmth. "Though I might concede that certain aspects of our partnership have proven more satisfying than initial calculations suggested." This understatement, delivered with the dry humor Adrian had come to appreciate in their private exchanges, drew a low chuckle from him. His hand moved to cover hers where it rested on the stone bench between them, the gesture conveying affection without requiring elaborate declaration. They sat in companionable silence as the sun continued its descent toward the distant hills, painting the formal gardens in increasingly dramatic contrasts of light and shadow. From the direction of the house came the sound of approaching footsteps on the gravel path. Sir Thomas Fairbairn and his wife, making their way toward the bench with unhurried progress. "They arrived while you were walking," Adrian explained. "I thought you might appreciate their company for dinner rather than formal entertainment." The thoughtfulness of this arrangement, recognizing Eleanor's preference for genuine friendship over social obligation, exemplified the attentiveness that had gradually transformed their marriage from calculated alliance to genuine partnership. Such considerations, offered without expectation of acknowledgement or gratitude, had become the foundation of their evolving relationship. As their guests approached, Eleanor rose to greet them, accepting Lady Fairbairn's warm embrace with genuine pleasure, while Sir Thomas and Adrian exchanged the comfortable greetings of long-standing friendship. The conversation turned to estate matters, village concerns, London political developments, the ordinary subjects that composed the fabric of shared lives rather than the dramatic confrontations that had marked the beginning of their journey together. Later, as twilight descended over Blackwood Hall, candles illuminated the small family dining room, where the four friends shared a meal marked by easy conversation and occasional laughter. Eleanor, observing Adrian's relaxed interaction with the Fairbairns, found herself contemplating the distance they had travelled together since that first dramatic encounter at Somerset Hall. The woman who had stood frozen amid cruel laughter, pearls clutched like talismans against humiliation, would scarcely recognize herself in the assured Duchess who now presided over Blackwood Hall with quiet authority. The transformation had come not primarily through external validation of title or social position, but through the internal recalibration that partnership with Adrian had gradually fostered. He caught her thoughtful gaze across the table, responding with the slight lift of eyebrow that constituted silent inquiry between them. Eleanor shook her head slightly, communicating that her thoughts required no immediate sharing, one of countless small exchanges they had developed, a private language understood only by its participants. As the evening concluded, and their guests departed with promises of future visits, Eleanor and Adrian stood together on the great stone steps of Blackwood Hall, watching the Fairbourne's carriage disappear down the long drive, lined with ancient oaks now ablaze with autumn color. The air carried the crisp scent of approaching winter, yet Eleanor felt only warmth as Adrian's arm encircled her waist with gentle possession. "Happy?" he inquired simply, the single word encompassing complexities that might have required volumes to fully articulate. Eleanor considered the question with characteristic thoroughness before responding. "Content," she offered, after thoughtful pause, "which I find preferable to mere happiness, more substantial, less transient." Adrian's arm tightened slightly around her waist, drawing her closer against the evening chill, a distinction worthy of consideration. Though perhaps both states might coexist rather than exclude each other. As they turned to re-enter the house, their home now shared in every meaningful sense, Eleanor reflected that he was right, as he often was in matters requiring emotional insight beneath his outwardly austere demeanor. Contentment provided the foundation. Happiness illuminated it with moments of particular brightness, like the afternoon sun, highlighting aspects of the garden through shifting clouds. The massive oak door closed behind them, shutting out the gathering darkness as they moved through halls now familiar and welcoming rather than imposing. Servants acknowledged their passage with respectful deference, tinged with genuine regard, a subtle but significant shift from the wary formality that had greeted Eleanor's initial arrival. In the library, a fire had been lit against the evening chill, its warm glow creating an island of comfort amid the towering bookshelves that contained generations of accumulated knowledge. This room had become their shared sanctuary, the space where conversation flowed most freely between them, unencumbered by formal roles or social expectations. "I received correspondence from Lady Beatrice today," Eleanor remarked as they settled into their customary chairs before the fire. "She mentions an interesting development regarding Lord Vale." Adrian's expression registered mild surprise. "I had not realized you maintained communication with Lady Beatrice." "Her intervention proved instrumental at a critical juncture," Eleanor reminded him. "That creates a certain bond despite our limited prior acquaintance." "Indeed. And what development does she report regarding our former adversary?" "Vale apparently intends to offer for the daughter of the American industrialist who recently established residence in Belgravia, Miss Katharina Morgan, aged 20, with a considerable fortune attached to her acceptance." Adrian considered this information with characteristic thoroughness. Strategic rather than sentimental, I would imagine. Vale requires financial reinforcement for his political ambitions. An American heiress seeks social validation through aristocratic connection, a pragmatic arrangement benefiting both parties. "Not unlike certain other arrangements one might name," Eleanor observed with the hint of dry humor that had become integral to their private discourse. Adrian's expression softened into genuine amusement. "With the critical distinction that our pragmatic beginning has evolved considerably beyond its initial parameters." His gaze held hers across the space between them, conveying meaning that required no verbal elaboration. "Would you change any aspect of our journey, Eleanor, if opportunity were presented?" The question invited honest reflection rather than mere reassurance. Eleanor gave it the consideration it deserved before responding. "I would not," she said finally, certainty evident in her tone. Even those aspects that proved challenging or temporarily painful contributed essential elements to the whole. Remove any single component, and the eventual outcome might differ in ways I would not prefer. Adrian nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. "My assessment precisely. Though perhaps," he added with unexpected vulnerability, "I might have more clearly articulated certain sentiments earlier in our association, rather than relying on practical considerations to carry emotional weight they were not designed to bear." The admission, subtle yet profound from a man of Adrian's reserved nature, touched Eleanor deeply. "Communication continues to develop between us," she observed gently. Neither party entered this arrangement with perfect understanding or expression. As the fire crackled companionably in the grate and evening settled more fully around Blackwood Hall, Eleanor contemplated the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the humiliation of Somerset Hall to the quiet triumph of genuine partnership with the remarkable man who had transformed her life through an unexpected proposal. Society, with its cruel dismissal of women who failed to secure matrimony within arbitrary timeframes, had deemed her finished at 32, a spinster whose value diminished with each passing season. Yet here she sat, Duchess of Wessex, having discovered that life's most meaningful chapters might begin precisely when conventional narratives suggested they should conclude. The pearls at her throat, 33 now, the latest added on her recent birthday at Adrian's insistence, caught the firelight as she moved, each one representing not merely a year of existence but experience accumulated, wisdom gained, capacity developed. What society had viewed as declining value, Adrian had recognized as appreciating worth, the transformation of passing time from liability to asset. A remarkable journey indeed, she murmured, partly to herself and partly to the man whose understanding had deepened alongside her own. Adrian's response came with the quiet certainty that had become the foundation of their shared life, with considerable distance yet to travel, together. In that simple affirmation lay all that Eleanor had once believed beyond her reach, not merely the social validation of title and position, but the profound satisfaction of genuine partnership based on mutual respect, growing affection, and shared purpose. The aging spinster and the austere duke had found in each other not the conventional romantic narrative society celebrated, but something far more substantial, a connection that honored experience rather than youth, substance rather than appearance, authenticity rather than performance. As darkness gathered beyond the library windows and firelight created an island of warmth against the autumn chill, the Duke and Duchess of Wessex continued their quiet conversation, two individuals who had discovered, against all expectation, that life's most meaningful beginnings sometimes arrive precisely when convention suggests the story should end. In the quiet spaces between society's rigid judgments, true value awaits recognition by discerning hearts. What the world dismisses as fading worth, a woman's advancing years, experiences gathered like pearls on a string, may in fact be wisdom polished to luminous perfection. Time does not diminish us, it completes us. Our most profound chapters may begin precisely when others declare our stories finished. Remember, dignity carried with grace silences even the cruelest laughter, and those who measure worth by depth rather than surface will always find treasures others overlook. The clock that counts our years is not our enemy, but the craftsman of our character. Each hour, each day, each season, adding layers of understanding that youth, for all its beauty, cannot possess. True partnership emerges not from blind passion, but from mutual recognition of genuine worth, seeing clearly where others merely glance. Touched by Eleanor and Adrian's journey from pragmatic arrangement to profound connection, subscribe now to continue receiving stories that celebrate how true worth often reveals itself in unexpected moments and unconventional pairings. The world may rush to celebrate youth and novelty, but wisdom knows that time adds depth to every worthy tale. Comment below with your thoughts on how society's perceptions of age and worth have evolved since the Victorian era, or perhaps how they remain troublingly unchanged. What pearls of wisdom have you gathered with each passing year? Your story matters here,